Yeah, you can let your friends know what kind of things you enjoy. Let me just pull that this tab all the way down over here. Oh, Lady Magritte, your news is that you might not be terrible at your new job. You got a new job. Wow, there we go. Well, that's very cool. That's really nice. Congratulations there, Lady Magritte. Yeah, you're very lucky. There's a lot of people right now who don't have one or are severely underemployed. You know, like their Rona's still doing a piece on the economy. That's for sure. So yeah, wow, that's awesome that you've managed to find some work there. Fantastic, Lady Magritte. Yeah. New York City just started phase 1 of 4. Yeah, tell you what, a lot of these cities are basically just throwing their hands up and being like, okay, I guess we're reopening, because literally people are just like, we're reopening. That's what happened here in California. Yeah, like yeah, well, yeah, don't want to get into it there, but yeah, well, when the vast majority of businesses and organizations are just like, screw it, we're opening no matter what. Yeah, oh boy. Zombie Psychic, you're terrible at your job. You're unemployed and keep trying to work. Oh, okay, you'll get something eventually. You just got to keep at it there, Zombie Psychic. You just got to keep at it. Keep at it. Lady Magritte started in May. You're just now figuring out if you're good at it or not. You totally lucked into this job. What? Oh boy. Can you share what kind of job it is there? Or I mean, is it like a real sweet, cushy one, or what? Rose says our numbers are so bad. Yeah, but yeah, it's tough. It is a tough decision. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people seem to be quite okay with the human cost. It involves video games and writing. That's all you can say. Okay, alrighty. Well, if you ever need a voice actor, you know where I am. A SAG after a voice actor. Let me just mention that there. All right. But let's do it. We should probably get on with it. Let's do it, okay? Because you didn't come here to listen to me flap my gums like this. Maybe you did. Maybe you did. I don't know. Who knows? You're gonna keep that in your back pocket. There we go. Alrighty. Let's okay, so I'm just popping out a chat window here. 1 second. Okay, I think we're good to go. We've okay, yeah. So yeah, I think the link just came up. You can get yourself a free digital download of this. I just checked on Amazon. They are not trying to screw anyone on this yet. Let's just take a look. What is their normal recommended thing actually? Where is it? All right. Okay. I'm trying to see what they normally charge for this free download, but I can't see it. Anyway, apparently I bought this 2.5 years ago. Apparently there's my thing there. Okay. Good. We are okay. We're reading. Zombie Psychic's like, go, let's do it. Okay, that's what okay, that's the only reason he's here. Yeah, so anyway, you can get your own free digital download there from Amazon. If you need one. Then don't forget, if they do try charging money for a free digital download, get it from Gutenberg.org. Yeah, right. Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Part 1. This is a work of fiction, blah, blah, blah. Alright, contents, in which, Chapter 1. There's a lot of chapters. Chapter 1, in which Phileas Fogg and Passepartout accept each other, the one as master, the other as man. Mr. Phileas Fogg lived in 1872 at number 7 Savile Row, Burlington Gardens, the house in which Sheridan died in 1814. He was one of the most noticeable members of the Reform Club, though he seemed always to avoid attracting attention. An enigmatical personage about whom little was known, except that he was a polished man of the world. People said that he resembled Byron. At least that his head was Byronic, but he was a bearded, tranquil Byron, who might live on 1,000 years without growing old. Certainly an Englishman, it was more doubtful whether Phileas Fogg was a Londoner. He was never seen on 'Change, nor at the bank, nor in the counting rooms of the city. No ships ever came into London docks of which he was the owner. He had no public employment. He had never been entered at any of the Inns of Court, either at the Temple, or Lincoln's Inn, or Gray's Inn. Nor had his voice ever resounded in the Court of Chancery, or in the Exchequer, or the Queen's Bench, or the ecclesiastical courts. He certainly was not a manufacturer, nor was he a merchant or a gentleman farmer. Oh, well, thank you very much, Myth Weaver. Thank you. Boy, oh boy. All those embers all add up to good things for the Carrington. Indeed, thank you so much. He certainly was not a manufacturer, nor was he a merchant or a gentleman farmer. His name was strange to the scientific and learned societies, and he never was known to take part in the sage deliberations of the Royal Institution, or the London Institution, the Artisans' Association, or the Institution of Arts and Sciences. He belonged, in fact, to none of the numerous societies which swarm in the English capital, from the Harmonic to that of the Entomologists, founded mainly for the purpose of abolishing pernicious insects. Phileas Fogg was a member of the Reform, and that was all. The way in which he got admission to this exclusive club was simple enough. He was recommended by the Barings, with whom he had an open credit. His checks were regularly paid at sight from his account current, which was always flush. Was Phileas Fogg rich? Undoubtedly, but those who knew him best could not imagine how he had made his fortune, and Mr. Fogg was the last person to whom to apply for the information. He was not lavish, nor, on the contrary, avaricious. For whenever he knew that money was needed for a noble, useful, or benevolent purpose, he supplied it quietly and sometimes anonymously. He was, in short, the least communicative of men. He talked very little, and seemed all the more mysterious for his taciturn manner. His daily habits were quite open to observation, but whatever he did was so exactly the same thing that he had always done before, that the wits of the curious were fairly puzzled. Lady Magritte can think of less communicative men you live in. Sometimes you don't need to say a lot of things, you know? Yeah. Had he traveled? It was likely, for no one seemed to know the world more familiarly. There was no spot so secluded that he did not appear to have an intimate acquaintance with it. He often corrected, with a few clear words, the 1,000 conjectures advanced by members of the club as to lost and unheard-of travelers, pointing out the true probabilities, and seeming as if gifted with a sort of second sight. So often did events justify his predictions. He must have traveled everywhere, at least in the spirit. It was at least certain that Phileas Fogg had not absented himself from London for many years. Those who were honored by a better acquaintance with him than the rest declared that nobody could pretend to have ever seen him anywhere else. His sole pastimes were reading the papers and playing whist. He often won at this game, which, as a silent one, harmonized with his nature, but his winnings never went into his purse, being reserved as a fund for his charities. Mr. Fogg played not to win, but for the sake of playing. The game was in his eyes a contest, a struggle with a difficulty, yet a motionless, unwearying struggle, congenial to his tastes. Phileas Fogg was not known to have either wife or children, which may happen to the most honest people, either relatives or near friends, which is certainly more unusual. He lived alone in his house in Savile Row, whither none penetrated. A single domestic sufficed to serve him. He breakfasted and dined at the club, at hours mathematically fixed, in the same room, at the same table, never taking his meals with other members, much less bringing a guest with him, and went home at exactly midnight, only to retire at once to bed. He never used the cozy chambers which the Reform provides for its favored members. He passed 10 hours out of the 24 in Savile Row, either in sleeping or making his toilet. When he chose to take a walk, it was with a regular step in the entrance hall, with its mosaic flooring, or in the circular gallery, with its dome supported by 20 red porphyry Ionic columns. What's Ionic? Relating or denoting a classical order of architecture characterized by a column with scroll shapes on either side of the capital. Okay. With its dome supported by 20 red porphyry Ionic columns, and illumined by blue painted windows. When he breakfasted or dined, all the resources of the club, its kitchens and pantries, its buttery and dairy, aided to crowd his table with their most succulent stores. He was served by the gravest waiters, in dress coats and shoes with swan-skin soles, who proffered the viands in a special porcelain, and on the finest linen. Club decanters of a lost mold contained his sherry, his port, and his cinnamon-spiced claret, while his beverages were refreshingly cooled with ice, brought at great cost from the American lakes. That's a long way to import ice from. If to live in this style is to be eccentric, it must be confessed that there is something good in eccentricity. The mansion in Savile Row, though not sumptuous, was exceedingly comfortable. The habits of its occupant were such as to demand but little from the sole domestic, but Phileas Fogg required him to be almost superhumanly prompt and regular. On this very 2nd of October he had dismissed James Forster, because that luckless youth had brought him shaving water at 84 degrees Fahrenheit, instead of 86. And he was awaiting his successor, who was due at the house between 11 and half past. Phileas Fogg was seated squarely in his armchair, his feet close together, like those of a grenadier on parade, his hands resting on his knees, his body straight, his head erect. He was steadily watching a complicated clock which indicated the hours, the minutes, the seconds, the days, the months, and the years. At exactly 11:30, Mr. Fogg would, according to his daily habit, quit Savile Row and repair to the Reform. A rap at this moment sounded on the door of the cozy apartment where Phileas Fogg was seated, and James Forster, the dismissed servant, appeared. "The new servant," said he. A young man of... No, James Forster, the dismissed servant, appeared to announce his successor. "The new servant," said he. A young man of 30 advanced and bowed. "You are a Frenchman, I believe?" asked Phileas Fogg. "And your name is John?" "Oh, Jean, if monsieur pleases," replied the newcomer. "Jean Passepartout, a surname which has clung to me because I have a natural aptness for going out of one business into another. I believe I am honest, monsieur, but to be outspoken. I've had several trades. I've been an itinerant singer, a circus rider where I used to vault like a leotard and dance on a rope like Blondin. Then I got to be a professor of gymnastics so as to make better use of my talents. And then I was a sergeant fireman at Paris, and assisted at many a big fire.
But I quitted France 5 years ago, and wishing to taste the sweets of domestic life, took service as a valet here in England. Finding myself out of place, and hearing that Monsieur Phileas Fogg was the most exact and settled gentleman in the United Kingdom, I have come to Monsieur in the hope of living with him a tranquil life, and forgetting even the name of Passepartout.
Yeah, a circus man. I like it. Passepartout suits me, responded Mr. Fogg. You are well recommended to me. I hear a good report of you. You know my conditions?
Yes, monsieur.
Good. What time is it?
22 minutes after 11,
returned Passepartout, drawing an enormous silver watch from the depths of his pocket. You are too slow, said Mr. Fogg.
Pardon me, monsieur. It is impossible.
You are 4 minutes too slow. No matter, it's enough to mention the error. Now, from this moment, 29 minutes after 11 a.m., this Wednesday, 2nd October, you are in my service. Phileas Fogg got up and took his hat in his left hand, put it on his head with an automatic motion, and went off without a word. Passepartout heard the street door shut once. It was his new master going out. He heard it shut again. It was his predecessor, James Forster, departing in his turn. And Passepartout remained alone in the house in Savile Row. All righty. Well, we're off to an okay start? I think so. Oh, did I switch over to the... Oh, yeah, I did. You can see that. You can read all that. It is. Oh, boy, oh, boy. Yeah. So yeah, it's this book is really good, by the way, really good. I remember reading this back in the old days. But yeah. Yeah, I've forgotten all the details of it. That is good. Okay. Chapter 2. We're just going to keep going, because that's how we get through it. Oh yeah, Phileas Fogg is easy. He's a very, very fastidious man. Chapter 2, in which Passepartout is convinced that he has at last found his ideal. Faith, muttered Passepartout, somewhat flurried. I've seen people at Madame Tussaud's wax museum as lively as my new master. Madame Tussaud's people, let it be said, are of wax, and are much visited in London. Speech is all that is wanting to make them human. By the way, yeah, she has wax museums in other places now, including Las Vegas, and boy, it is really, really nice. Really, really nice. It's just like it's really amazing, the setups they have there. I went to the Madame Tussauds in London, the original one, a long while back. It was very good. They had their big special exhibit was the big Doctor Who one. It was just like totally, oh boy, it was just amazing. But yeah, and then they had, like, you know, the good old Chamber of Horrors and all of that too. But it was pretty good looking back then. But now, just like it's just like at a whole other level. It's just so well done. But what was really weird is I remember back in the in London's one. I'm sure it's changed since now, but like all of the figures and everything like that were like, you know, behind like barriers of some kind, so you couldn't get close to them. You could take, you know, photos of them and stuff like that, but you know, you couldn't like walk right on up to them. They were like kind of like everything was set in like a big diorama kind of deal, and corded off. The one in Las Vegas, You could like walk right up to them. You could like pose with them, and it was very much more. It wasn't exactly interactive, but you could get real up close. And I'm sure they had like all kinds of security standing by to make sure no one monkeyed with anything there. But yeah, it was just very different. Anyway, I'm sure the one in London has changed as well. But there we go. Let's get on with it. All right. The one in Vegas is creepy. And it's I don't know. I mean, wax figures. I suppose if you like old like Vincent Price movies like House of Wax and stuff like that, and if those were impressionable upon you when you were younger, they might stay a little creepy. But no, they're fun. They're very cool. All right. Right now, though, I would not want to be going to Las Vegas, as open as they claim to be. Madame Tussaud's people, let it be said, are of wax and are much visited in London. Speech is all that is wanting to make them human. During his brief interview with Mr. Fogg, Passepartout had been carefully observing him. He appeared to be a man about 40 years of age, with fine, handsome features, and a tall, well-shaped figure. His hair and whiskers were light, his forehead compact and unwrinkled, his face rather pale, his teeth magnificent. His countenance possessed in the highest degree what physiognomists call repose in action, a quality of those who act rather than talk. Calm and phlegmatic, with a clear eye, Mr. Fogg seemed a perfect type of that English composure which Angelica Kauffmann so skillfully represented on canvas. Seen in the various phases of his daily life, he gave the idea of being perfectly well balanced, as exactly regulated as a Leroy chronometer. Phileas Fogg was, indeed, exactitude personified, and this was betrayed even in the expression of his very hands and feet, for in men, as well as in animals, the limbs themselves are expressive of the passions. He was so exact that he was never in a hurry, was always ready, and was economical alike of his steps and his motions. He never took one step too many, and always went to his destination by the shortest cut. He made no superfluous gestures, and was never seen to be moved or agitated. He was the most deliberate person in the world, yet always reached his destination at the exact moment. He lived alone, and, so to speak, outside of every social relation, and as he knew that in this world account must be taken of friction, and that friction retards, he never rubbed against anybody. As for Passepartout, he was a true Parisian of Paris. Since he had abandoned his own country for England, taking service as a valet, he had in vain searched for a master after his own heart. Passepartout was by no means one of those pert dunces depicted by Molière with a bold gaze and a nose held high in the air. He was an honest fellow, with pleasant face, lips a trifle protruding, soft-mannered and serviceable, with a good round head, such as one likes to see on the shoulders of a friend. His eyes were blue, his complexion rubicund, his figure almost portly and well-built, his body muscular, and his physical powers fully developed by the exercises of his younger days. His brown hair was somewhat tumbled, for while the ancient sculptors are said to have known 18 methods of arranging Minerva's tresses, Passepartout was familiar with but one of dressing his own. 3 strokes of a large tooth-comb completed his toilet. Good morning, Billy R. Good morning. How you doing? It would be rash to predict how Passepartout's lively nature would agree with Mr. Fogg. It was impossible to tell whether the new servant would turn out as absolutely methodical as his master required. Experience alone could solve the question. The Passepartout had been a sort of vagrant in his early years, and now yearned for repose. But so far he had failed to find it, though he had already served in 10 English houses.
but he could not take root in any of these. With chagrin, he found his masters invariably whimsical and irregular, constantly running about the country, or on the lookout for adventure. His last master, young Lord Longferry, Member of Parliament, after passing his nights in the Haymarket taverns, was too often brought home in the morning on policemen's shoulders. Passepartout, desirous of respecting the gentleman whom he served, ventured a mild remonstrance on such conduct, which being ill received, he took his leave. Hearing that Mr. Phileas Fogg was looking for a servant, and that his life was one of unbroken regularity, that he neither travelled nor stayed from home overnight, he felt sure that this would be the place he was after. He presented himself and was accepted, as has been seen. Alrighty. Billy R. is doing a park for your modern build. What modern build are you working on there, Billy R.? By the way, I catch up on chat when I can. Sometimes I just go and go and go. And I usually in between chapters, so if I don't get back to you right away, it's because I'm reading. At 11:30, then, Passepartout found himself alone in the house in Savile Row. He began its inspection without delay, scouring it from cellar to garret. So clean, well-arranged, solemn a mansion pleased him. It seemed to him like a snail's shell, lighted and warmed by gas, which sufficed for both these purposes. When Passepartout reached the second story, he recognized at once the room which he was to inhabit, and he was well satisfied with it. Electric bells and speaking tubes afforded communication with the lower stories, while on the mantel stood an electric clock, precisely like that in Mr. Fogg's bedchamber, both beating the same second at the same instant. "That's good, that'll do," said Passepartout to himself. He suddenly observed, hung over the clock, a card which upon inspection proved to be a program of the daily routine of the house. It comprised all that was required of the servant, from 8 in the morning, exactly at which hour Phileas Fogg rose, till 11:30, when he left the house for the Reform Club. All the details of service, the tea and toast at 23 minutes past 8, the shaving water at 37 minutes past 9, and the toilet at 20 minutes before 10. Everything was regulated and foreseen that was to be done from 11:30 a.m. till midnight, the hour at which the methodical gentleman retired. Mr. Fogg's wardrobe was amply supplied, and in the best taste. It takes a job for the regular. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's, I think Passepartout he's going to be a little surprised shortly. Mr. Fogg's wardrobe was amply supplied, and in the best taste. Each pair of trousers, coat, and vest bore a number, indicating the time of year and season at which they were in turn to be laid out for wearing, and the same system was applied to the master's shoes. In short, the house in Savile Row, which must have been a very temple of disorder and unrest under the illustrious but disappointed Sheridan, was coziness, comfort, and method idealized. There was no study, nor were there books, which would have been quite useless to Mr. Fogg, for at the Reform 2 libraries, one of general literature and the other of law and politics, were at his service. A moderate-sized safe stood in his bedroom, constructed so as to defy fire, as well as burglars. But Passepartout found neither arms nor hunting weapons anywhere. Everything betrayed the most tranquil and peaceful habits. Having scrutinized the house from top to bottom, he rubbed his hands. A broad smile overspread his features, and he said joyfully, "Oh, this is just what I wanted. We shall get on together, Mr. Fogg and I. What a domestic and regular gentleman. A real machine. Well, I don't mind serving a machine.
Yeah. He's in for a rude awakening very shortly. Doing modern houses on Minecraft, that sounds fun. Very cool. Well, we'll have to come take a look at it sometime. It's been a long time since we've done like a Minecraft tours. We stopped doing them because some people were going out of their way to be a little trolley on them. But they were a lot of fun. I have no sub goal. I believe I do. It says 0. That's probably because I reset it after that one. Let me do I need Well, it should be. It is showing up in the lower left, right? Let me. One second. I can just fix that real fast. One second. Bum ba 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 ba. Which tab is it? No. Yeah, right there. One second. Boop. There we go. There we go. All right. Should have reset. I hope it did. Boom. Okay. Lost my place. You see 1. Yes, yes, yes. And that would be you. Yes. It gets reset every Monday. Every Monday. You love books that have chapter titles? Uh-huh. Where are we at? Where are we at? So I'm just taking a little look at a few things here, right? Okay, we got a, okay. Let me pull my, okay, got my book back. Here we go. In chapter 3, in which a conversation takes place which seems likely to cost Phileas Fogg dear. Phileas Fogg, just moving my audio thing here. Phileas Fogg, having shut the door of his house at 11:30, and having put his right foot before his left 575 times, and his left foot before his right 576 times, reached the Reform Club, an imposing edifice in Pall Mall, which could not have cost less than 3 millions. He repaired at once to the dining room, the 9 windows of which open upon a tasteful garden, where the trees were already gilded with an autumn coloring, and took his place at the habitual table, the cover of which had already been laid for him. His breakfast consisted of a side dish, a broiled fish with Reading sauce, a scarlet slice of roast beef garnished with mushrooms, a rhubarb and gooseberry tart, and a morsel of Cheshire cheese, the whole being washed down with several cups of tea, for which the Reform is famous. He rose at 1:13 and directed his steps towards the large hall, a sumptuous apartment adorned with lavishly framed paintings. A flunkey handed him an uncut Times, which he proceeded to cut with a skill which betrayed familiarity with this delicate operation. The perusal of this paper absorbed Phileas Fogg until 4:15, while the Standard, his next task, occupied him till the dinner hour. Dinner passed as breakfast had done, and Mr. Fogg reappeared in the reading-room and sat down to the Pall Mall at 6:20. Half an hour later, several members of the Reform came in and drew up to the fireplace, where a coal fire was steadily burning. They were Mr. Fogg's usual partners at whist: Andrew Stewart, an engineer, John Sullivan and Samuel Fallentin, bankers, Thomas Flanagan, a brewer, and Gautier Ralph, one of the directors of the Bank of England, all rich and highly respectable personages, even in a club which comprises the princes of English trade and finance. You've never read the book. His books are great, yeah.
Well, Ralph, said Thomas Flanagan. Said Thomas Flanagan. What about that robbery?
Oh, replied Stewart. The bank will lose more money. Oh, on the contrary, broke in Ralph. I hope we may put our hands on the robber. Skillful detectives have been sent to all the principal ports of America and the continent, and he'll be a clever fellow if he slips through their fingers.
But have you got the robber's description?
Asked Stewart.
Oh, in the first place, he's not a robber at all, returned Ralph positively.
What? A fellow who makes off with £55,000, no robber?
No.
Well, perhaps he's a manufacturer then.
The Daily Telegraph says he's a gentleman.
Oh, no. The Daily Telegraph says that he is a gentleman. It was Phileas Fogg, whose head now emerged from behind his newspapers, who made this remark. He bowed to his friends and entered into the conversation. The affair which formed its subject, and which was town talk, had occurred 3 days before at the Bank of England. A package of banknotes to the value of £55,000 had been taken from the principal cashier's table, that functionary being at the moment engaged in registering the receipt of 3 shillings and 6pence. Of course, he could not have his eyes everywhere. Let it be observed that the Bank of England reposes a touching confidence in the honesty of the public. There are neither guards nor gratings to protect its treasures. Gold, silver, banknotes are freely exposed, at the mercy of the first comer. A keen observer of English customs relates that, being in one of the rooms of the bank one day, he had the curiosity to examine a gold ingot weighing some 7 or 8 pounds. He took it up, scrutinized it, passed it to his neighbor, he to the next man, and so on until the ingot, going from hand to hand, was transferred to the end of a dark entry. Nor did it return to its place for half an hour. Meanwhile, the cashier had not so much as raised his head. But in the present instance, things had not gone so smoothly. Good morning, Lady Death. Good morning. The package of notes not being found when 5 o'clock sounded from the ponderous clock in the drawing office, the amount was passed to the account of profit and loss. As soon as the robbery was discovered, picked detectives hastened off to Liverpool, Glasgow, Havre, Suez, Brindisi, New York, and other ports, inspired by the profit reward of £2,000 and 5% on the sum that might be recovered. Detectives were also charged with narrowly watching those who arrived at or left London by rail, and a judicial examination was at once entered upon. There were real grounds for supposing, as the Daily Telegraph said, that the thief did not belong to a professional band. On the day of the robbery, a well-dressed gentleman of polished manners, and with a well-to-do air, had been observed going to and fro in the paying room, where the crime was committed. A description of him was easily procured and sent to the detectives, and some hopeful spirits, of whom Ralph was one, did not despair of his apprehension. The papers and clubs were full of the affair, and everywhere people were discussing the probabilities of a successful pursuit, and the Reform Club was especially agitated, several of its members being bank officials. Ralph would not concede that the work of the detectives was likely to be in vain, for he thought that the prize offered would greatly stimulate their zeal and activity. But Stewart was far from sharing this confidence, and as they placed themselves at the whist table, they continued to argue the matter. Stewart and Flanagan played together, while Phileas Fogg had Fallontine for his partner. As the game proceeded, the conversation ceased, excepting between the rubbers, when it revived again. I maintain... who's Stewart? I maintain, said Stewart, that the chances are in favor of the thief, who must be a shrewd fellow. Well, but where can he fly to? asked Ralph. "No country's safe for him."
"Oh, pshaw."
"Where could he go, then?"
"Oh, I don't know that. The world's big enough."
"It was once," said Phileas Fogg in a low tone. "Cut, sir," he added, handing the cards to Thomas Flanagan. The discussion fell during the rubber, after which Stewart took up its thread.
"Oh, what did you mean by once? Has the world grown smaller?"
Certainly," returned Ralph. I agree with Mr. Fogg. The world has grown smaller, since a man can now go round it 10 times more quickly than 100 years ago, and that's why the search for this thief will be more likely to succeed."
"And also why the thief can get away more easily."
"Be as good as to play, Mr. Stewart," said Phileas Fogg. But the incredulous Stewart was not convinced, and when the hand was finished, said eagerly,
"You have a strange way, Ralph, of proving that the world has grown smaller. So, because you can go round it in 3 months—"
"In 80 days," interrupted Phileas Fogg. "Oh, that's true, gentlemen," added John Sullivan. "Only 80 days, now that the section between Rothal and Allahabad on the Great Indian Peninsula Railway has opened. Here's the estimate made by the Daily Telegraph. From London to Suez via Mont Cenis and Brindisi by rail and steamboats, 7 days. From Suez to Bombay by steamer, 13 days. From Bombay to Calcutta by rail, 3 days. From Calcutta to Hong Kong by steamer, 13 days. From Hong Kong to Yokohama, Japan, by steamer, 6 days. From Yokohama to San Francisco by steamer, 22 days. From San Francisco to New York by rail, 7 days. From New York to London by steamer and rail, 9 days. Total, 80 days.
"Yes, in 80 days," exclaimed Stewart, who in his excitement made a false deal. "But that doesn't take into account bad weather, contrary winds, shipwrecks, railway accidents, and so on."
"All included," returned Phileas Fogg, continuing to play despite the discussion.
"But suppose the Hindus or Indians pull up the rails," replied Stewart. "Suppose they stop the trains, pillage the luggage vans, and scalp the passengers."
"All included," calmly retorted Fogg, adding, as he threw down the cards, 2 trumps. "Good morning, Kate." Stewart, whose turn it was to deal, gathered them up and went on.
"You're right, theoretically, Mr. Fogg, but practically—"
"Practically also, Mr. Stewart."
"I'd like to see you do it in 80 days.
"It depends on you. Shall we go?"
"Heaven preserve me, but I would wager £4,000 that such a journey made under these conditions is impossible."
"Oh, quite possible, on the contrary," returned Mr. Fogg.
"Well, make it then."
"The journey round the world in 80 days?"
"Yes."
"I should like nothing better."
"When?"
"At once. Only I warn you that I shall do it at your expense."
"Oh, it's absurd," cried Stewart, who was beginning to be annoyed at the persistency of his friend. "Come, let's get on with the game."
"Deal over again, then," said Phileas Fogg. "There's a false deal." Stewart took up the pack with a feverish hand, then suddenly put them down again.
"Well, Mr. Fogg," said he, "it shall be so. I will wager the 4,000 on it."
"Oh, calm yourself, my dear Stewart," said Valentine. "It's only a joke."
"When I say I'll wager," returned Stewart, "I mean it."
"All right," said Mr. Fogg, and turning to the others, he continued, "I have a deposit of 20,000 at Barings, which I will willingly risk upon it."
£20,000,
cried Sullivan.
£20,000 which you could lose by a single accidental delay.
"The unforeseen does not exist," quietly replied Phileas Fogg. "Oh, but Mr. Fogg, 80 days are only the estimate of the least possible time in which the journey can be made. A well-used minimum suffices for everything. But in order not to exceed it, you must jump mathematically from the trains upon the steamers, and from the steamers upon the trains again. I will jump mathematically." "Oh, you're joking." "A true Englishman doesn't joke when he's talking about so serious a thing as a wager," replied Phileas Fogg solemnly. "I will bet £20,000 against anyone who wishes that I will bet £20,000 against anyone who wishes that I will make the tour of the world in 80 days or less, in 1920 hours, or 115,200 minutes. Do you accept?"
We accept,"
replied Monsieurs Stewart, Fallentin, Sullivan, Flanagan, and Ralph, after consulting each other. "Good," said Mr. Fogg. "The train leaves for Dover at 9:15. I will take it." "This very evening?" asked Stewart. "This very evening," returned Phileas Fogg. He took out and consulted a pocket almanac, and added, "As today is Wednesday, the 2nd of October, I shall be due in London in this very room of the Reform Club on Saturday, the 21st of December, at 9:15 p.m., or else the £20,000, now deposited in my name at Barings, will belong to you, in fact and in right, gentlemen. Here is a check for the amount." A memorandum of the wager was at once drawn up and signed by the 6 parties, during which Phileas Fogg preserved a stoical composure. He certainly did not bet to win, and had only staked the £20,000, half of his fortune, because he foresaw that he might have to expend the other half to carry out this difficult, not to say unattainable, project. As for his antagonists, they seemed much agitated, not so much by the value of their stake, as because they had some scruples about betting under conditions so difficult to their friend. The clock struck 7, and the party offered to suspend the game so that Mr. Fogg might make his preparations at departure. "I'm quite ready now," was his tranquil repose. "Diamonds are trumps. Be so good as to play, gentlemen." All righty. Things escalating. He seems very, very spur of the moment for someone so, so methodical. Yeah. Chapter 4, in which Phileas Fogg astounds Passepartout, his servant. Having won 20 guineas at whist, and taken leave of his friends, Phileas Fogg, at 25 minutes past 7, left the Reform Club. Passepartout, who had conscientiously studied the programme of his duties, was more than surprised to see his master guilty of the inexactness of appearing at this unaccustomed hour, for according to rule he was not due in Savile Row until precisely midnight. Mr. Fogg repaired to his bedroom and called out, "Passepartout." Passepartout did not reply. It could not be he who was called. It was not the right hour. "Passepartout," repeated Mr. Fogg, without raising his voice. Passepartout made his appearance. "I've called you twice," observed his master.
But it is not midnight,"
responded the other, showing his watch. "I know it. I don't blame you. We start for Dover and Calais in 10 minutes. A puzzled grin overspread Passepartout's round face. Clearly he had not comprehended his master.
"Monsieur's going to leave home?"
"Yes," returned Phileas Fogg. "We are going round the world." Passepartout opened wide his eyes, raised his eyebrows, held up his hands, and seemed about to collapse, so overcome was he with stupefied astonishment.
"Round the world," he murmured.
"In 80 days?" responded Mr. Fogg, "so we haven't a moment to lose."
"Oh, but the trunks!" gasped Passepartout, unconsciously swaying his head from right to left.
"We'll have no trunks, only a carpet bag, with 2 shirts and 3 pairs of stockings for me, and the same for you. We'll buy our clothes on the way. Bring down my mackintosh and traveling cloak, and some stout shoes, though we shall do little walking. Make haste." Passepartout tried to reply, but could not. He went out, mounted to his own room, fell into a chair, and muttered, "That's good, that is, and I, who wanted to remain quiet." He mechanically set about making the preparations for departure. Around the world in 80 days. Was his master a fool? No. Was this a joke, then? They were going to Dover. Good. To Calais. Good again. After all, Passepartout, who had been away from France 5 years, would not be sorry to set foot on his native soil again. Perhaps they would go as far as Paris, and it would do his eyes good to see Paris once more. But surely a gentleman so chary of his steps would stop there. No doubt, but then it was none the less true that he was going away, this so domestic person hitherto. By 8 o'clock, Passepartout had packed the modest carpet-bag, containing the wardrobes of his master and himself. Then, still troubled in mind, he carefully shut the door of his room and descended to Mr. Fogg. Mr. Fogg was quite ready. Under his arm might have been observed a red-bound copy of Bradshaw's Continental Railway Steam Transit and General Guide, with its timetable showing the arrival and departure of steamers and railways. He took the carpet-bag, opened it, and slipped into it a goodly roll of Bank of England notes, which would pass wherever he might go. "You have forgotten nothing?" asked he.
"Oh, nothing, monsieur."
"My mackintosh and cloak?"
"Oh, here they are."
"Good. Take this carpet-bag," handing it to Passepartout. "Take good care of it, for there are 20,000 pounds in it." Passepartout nearly dropped the bag, as if the 20,000 pounds were in gold, and weighed him down. Master and man then descended. The street door was double-locked, and at the end of Savile Row they took a cab and drove rapidly to Charing Cross. The cab stopped before the railway station at 20 minutes past 8. Passepartout jumped off the box and followed his master, who, after accompanying the cabman, was about to enter the station, when a poor beggar-woman, with a child in her arms, her naked feet smeared with mud, her head covered with a wretched bonnet, from which hung a tattered feather, and her shoulders shrouded in a ragged shawl, approached and mournfully asked for alms. Mr. Fogg took out the 20 guineas he had just won at whist, and handed them to the beggar, saying, "Here, my good woman, I'm glad that I met you," and passed on. Passepartout had a moist sensation about his eyes. His master's action touched his susceptible heart. 2 first-class tickets for Paris having been speedily purchased, Mr. Fogg was crossing the station to the train when he perceived his 5 friends of the Reform. "Well, gentlemen," said he, "I'm off, you see, and if you will examine my passport when I get back, you will be able to judge whether I have accomplished the journey agreed upon."
"Oh, that would be quite unnecessary, Mr. Fogg," said Ralph politely. "We will trust your word as a gentleman of honor." "You do not forget when you're due in London again?" asked Stewart.
"In 80 days, on Saturday, the 21st of December, 1872, at 9:15 p.m. Goodbye, gentlemen." Phileas Fogg and his servant seated themselves in a first-class carriage at 20 minutes before 9. 5 minutes later the whistle screamed, and the train slowly glided out of the station. A Macintosh is a raincoat. It's like a real big, thick kind of raincoat. I'm sure you've seen the like the fishermen with the bright yellow the bright yellow things to keep the waves off and stuff like that. Kind of like that. Blip, 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 blip. Where we at? You know, I'm gonna look that up just because I was actually wrong about something like that the other day. Wiki Macintosh raincoat. I'll look that up. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Yeah. The Macintosh raincoat is a brand name, named after its Scottish inventor Charles Macintosh. But yeah. Here we go. Here's a nice. Oh, there's a couple of different pictures of it. Yeah, waterproof raincoat made out of rubberized fabric. Right. Yeah. So this is a big rubberized fabric raincoat. Big thing, and it comes in all kinds of different designs. Okay, the one which I was thinking of. Yeah. On the Wikipedia page, they're showing some fancy designs of it. But yeah, the ones I'm familiar with are the ones that are for sailors. Right. Yeah. Very good. Where are we at? Okay. You do not forget when you are due in London again, asked Stuart. In 80 days, on Saturday, the 21st of December, 1872, at 9:15 p.m. Goodbye, gentlemen. Phileas Fogg and his servant seated themselves in a first-class carriage at 20 minutes before 9. 5 minutes later, the whistle screamed, and the train slowly glided out of the station. The night was dark, and a fine, steady rain was falling. Phileas Fogg, snugly ensconced in his corner, did not open his lips. The Passepartout, not yet recovered from his stupefaction, clung mechanically to the carpet-bag with its enormous treasure. Just as the train was whirling through Sydenham, Passepartout suddenly uttered a cry of despair. "What's the matter?" asked Mr. Fogg.
"Oh, alas, in my hurry, I forgot—"
"What?"
"To turn off the gas in my room."
"Very well, young man," returned Fogg coolly. "It will burn at your expense." All right. I think that tells us quite a lot about Mr. Fogg right there. Forgot to turn the gas off. Okay, that's coming out of your pay. All righty. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to suck down some coffee real fast. I mean, it's a pretty funny book so far. Pretty funny book. To adventure. To infinity and beyond. That's right, Mythweaver. Thank you for those embers. Thank you. Nice. All righty. That map is a great one. Great pick. There we go. Okay. That's all the coffee I'm having today. There we go. All righty. Don't forget, if anyone does feel like throwing the channel a host, so your friends can see what you like to see. Those are kind of nice. I'm just mentioning that there. Likewise, once again, there is the share stream button if you're enjoying this. If you think your friends might like it too, yeah. Let them know too. Very good. Here we go. Chapter 5. In which a new species of funds, unknown to the moneyed men, appears on 'Change. Phileas Fogg rightly suspected that his departure from London would create a lively sensation at the West End. The news of the bet spread through the Reform Club and afforded an exciting topic of conversation to its members. From the club, it soon got into the papers throughout England. The boasted tour of the world was talked about, disputed, and argued with as much warmth as if the subject were another Alabama claim. Some took sides with Phileas Fogg. What is that about? Another Alabama claim. I'm going to make let's say, maybe have to check that out later. Some took sides with Phileas Fogg, but the large majority shook their heads and declared against him. It was absurd, impossible, they declared, that the tour of the world could be made, except theoretically, and on paper, in this minimum of time, and with the existing means of traveling. The Times, Standard, Morning Post, and Daily News, and 20 other highly respectable newspapers scouted Mr. Fogg's project as madness. The Daily Telegraph alone hesitatingly supported him. People in general thought him a lunatic, and blamed his Reform Club friends for having accepted a wager which betrayed the mental aberration of its proposer. Articles no less passionate than logical appeared on the question, for geography is one of the pet subjects of the English, and the columns devoted to Phileas Fogg's venture were eagerly devoured by all classes of readers. At first, some rash individuals, principally of the gentler sex, espoused his cause, which became still more popular when the Illustrated London News came out with his portrait, copied from a photograph in the Reform Club. A few readers of the Daily Telegraph even dared to say, why not? After all, stranger things have come to pass. At last, a long article appeared on the 7th of October in the Bulletin of the Royal Geographical Society, which treated the question from every point of view and demonstrated the utter folly of the enterprise. Everything it said was against the travelers, every obstacle imposed alike by man and by nature. A miraculous agreement of the times of departure and arrival, which was impossible, was absolutely necessary to his success. He might, perhaps, reckon on the arrival of trains at the designated hours in Europe, where the distances were relatively moderate, but when he calculated upon crossing India in 3 days, and the United States in 7, could he rely beyond misgiving upon accomplishing his task? There were accidents to machinery, the liability of trains to run off the line, collisions, bad weather, the blocking up by snow. Were not all these against Phileas Fogg? Would he not find himself, when traveling by steamer in winter, at the mercy of the winds and fogs? Is it uncommon for the best ocean steamers to be 2 or 3 days behind time? But a single delay would suffice to fatally break the chain of communication. Should Phileas Fogg once miss, even by an hour, a steamer, he would have to wait for the next, and that would irrevocably render his attempt vain. This article made a great deal of noise, and being copied into all the papers, seriously depressed the advocates of the rash tourist. Everybody knows that England is the world of betting men, who are of a higher class than mere gamblers. To bet is in the English temperament. Not only the members of the Reform, but the general public made heavy wagers for or against Phileas Fogg, who was set down in the betting books as if he were a racehorse. Bonds were issued and made their appearance on 'Change. Phileas Fogg bonds were offered at par or at a premium, and a great business was done in them. But 5 days after the article in the Bulletin of the Geographical Society appeared, the demand began to subside. Phileas Fogg declined. They were offered by packages, at first of 5, then of 10, until at last nobody would take less than 20, 50. 100. Lord Albemarle, an elderly paralytic gentleman, was now the only advocate of Phileas Fogg left. This noble lord, who was fastened to his chair, would have given his fortune to be able to make the tour of the world, if it took 10 years, and he bet £5,000 on Phileas Fogg. When the folly, as well as the uselessness of the adventure was pointed out to him, he contented himself with replying, "If the thing is feasible, the first to do it ought to be an Englishman." The Fogg party dwindled more and more. Everybody was going against him, and the bets stood 150 and 200 to 1. And a week after his departure, an incident occurred which deprived him of backers at any price. The Commissioner of Police was sitting in his office at 9 o'clock one evening, when the following telegraphic dispatch was put into his hands. "Suez to London. Rowan, Commissioner of Police, Scotland Yard. I've found the bank robber, Phileas Fogg. Send without delay warrant of arrest to Bombay. Fix, detective." The effect of this dispatch was instantaneous. The polished gentleman disappeared to give place to the bank robber. His photograph, which was hung with those of the rest of the members of the Reform Club, was minutely examined, and it betrayed, feature by feature, the description of the robber which had been provided to the police. The mysterious habits of Phileas Fogg were recalled, his solitary ways, his sudden departure, and it seemed clear that in undertaking a tour round the world on the pretext of a wager, he had had no other end in view than to elude the detectives and throw them off his track. 150,200 to 1. No, that was a that was like an escalating number count. The bets soon stood at 150 and 200 to 1, because the same thing happened earlier. They were offered by packages, at first of 5, then of 10, until at last nobody would take them at less than 20, 50, 100. And the same thing happens over here, where it talks about the bet stood at 150 and 200 to 1. So yeah, that's not quite like that. Oh yeah. All right, so now he might be, I don't know, is he the bank robber? Is he the bank robber which we read about the previous chapter? I don't know. Chapter 6, in which Fix, the detective, betrays a very natural impatience. He's running around with a big carpet bag full of cash. £20,000 in cash, which is, what is this 1860? There's got to be a money calculator. 1872, 2123 pounds in today's money. There's a calculator for it. Here we go. Okay, that can't be right. Oh, hang on. Boy, I totally blew that. Okay, hang on. Backspace. Okay, £20,000. Historical conversion. Here we go. Enter source year. Here we go. 1872. No, 1872. 1872. Target year 2020, and old value 20,000 pounds. Bloop. Okay, that's just over $2 million. According to the to that historical conversion of currency. Okay. So I mean, so that's like a lot of cash. That's a lot of cash to just be like running around with in your little bag. Is up there, Nash to read? What's up? Yeah, you are back. Nice. What did you watch yesterday, Mrs. Shadowtronics? Oh, which movie with Jackie Chan? I loved all his stuff from the 90s. Yeah, the 80s and 90s. Oh, you just watched Around the World. That's right. He was in a recent remake of it, right? Of Around the World in 80 Days. Yeah, I haven't seen it. Was it good? My favorite movie of his is Rumble in the Bronx. That's funny. Okay, all right. Let's. Okay, so just for context, okay, the £20,000 which they're carrying around in their suitcase, it's like it's the equivalent of $2 million today. So. I mean that's a lot. That's a lot to have on your person. If you, I mean, if you're not a, I mean, well, what kind of normal person does that? So far, it's pretty good. It's on Disney Plus again. Chapter 6, in which Fix the detective betrays a very natural impatience. The circumstances under which this telegraphic dispatch about Phileas Fogg was sent were as follows. The steamer Mongolia, belonging to the Peninsular and Oriental Company, built of iron, of 2,800 tons burden and 500 horsepower, was due at 11 o'clock a.m. on Wednesday, the 9th of October, at Suez. The Mongolia plied regularly between Brindisi and Bombay via the Suez Canal, and was one of the fastest steamers belonging to the company, always making more than 10 knots an hour between Brindisi and Suez, and 9.5 between Suez and Bombay. 2 men were promenading up and down the wharves, among the crowd of natives and strangers who were sojourning at this once straggling village. Now, thanks to the enterprise of Monsieur Lesseps, a fast-growing town. Who's Monsieur Lesseps? Lesseps Suez. Was he one of the dudes responsible for that? Ferdinand de Lesseps. He was a French diplomat and later developer of the Suez Canal. All right, yeah. So yeah, there's. I think they're kind of glossing over the amount of lives lost on this thing here. They're saying thanks to Lesseps, this is a burgeoning town. All right. Where are we at? Now, thanks to the enterprise of Monsieur Lesseps, one of the architects of the Suez Canal, a fast-growing town. One was the British consul at Suez, who, despite the prophecies of the English government and the unfavorable predictions of Stevenson, was in the habit of seeing, from his office window, English ships daily passing to and fro on the Great Canal, by which the old roundabout route from England to India by the Cape of Good Hope was abridged by at least a half. The other was a small, slight-built personage with a nervous, intelligent face and bright eyes peering out from under eyebrows which he was incessantly twitching. He was just now manifesting unmistakable signs of impatience, nervously pacing up and down, and unable to stand still for a moment. This was Fix, one of the detectives who had been dispatched from England in search of the bank robber. It was his task to narrowly watch every passenger who arrived at Suez, and to follow up all who seemed to be suspicious characters, or bore a resemblance to the description of the criminal, which he had received 2 days before from the police headquarters at London. The detective was evidently inspired by the hope of obtaining the splendid reward which would be the prize of success, and awaited with a feverish impatience, easy to understand, the arrival of the steamer Mongolia. "So you say, Counsel," asked he for the 20th time, "that this steamer is never behind time?" "No, Mr. Fix," replied the consul. She was bespoken yesterday at Port Said, and the rest of the way is of no account to such a craft. I repeat that the Mongolia has been in advance of the time required by the company's regulations, and gained the prize awarded for excess of speed."
"Does she come directly from Brindisi?"
Directly from Brindisi. She takes on the Indian mails there, and she left there Saturday at 5 p.m. Have patience, Mr. Fix, she'll not be late. But really, I don't see how, from the description you have, you'll be able to recognize your man, even if he is on board the Mongolia."
"A man rather feels the presence of these fellows, Consul, than recognizes them. You must have a scent for them, and a scent is like a sixth sense, which combines hearing, seeing, and smelling. I've arrested more than one of these gentlemen in my time, and if my thief is on board, I'll answer for it. He'll not slip through my fingers."
"Well, I hope so, Mr. Fix, for it was a heavy robbery."
"A magnificent robbery, Consul. £55,000. We don't often have such windfalls. Burglars are getting to be so contemptible nowadays. A fellow gets hung for a handful of shillings."
"Mr. Fix," said the consul, "I like your way of talking, and hope you'll succeed. But I fear you'll find it far from easy. Don't you see, the description which you have there has a singular resemblance to an honest man."
"Consul," remarked the detective dogmatically, "great robbers always resemble honest folks. Fellows who have rascally faces have only one course to take, and that is to remain honest. Otherwise they would be arrested offhand. The artistic thing is to unmask honest countenances. It's no light task, I admit, but a real art."
Mr. Fix evidently was not wanting in a tinge of self-conceit. Little by little, the scene upon the quay became more animated. Sailors of various nations, merchants, shipbrokers, porters, fallers, bustled to and fro as if the steamer were immediately expected. The weather was clear and slightly chilly. Yes, Lady Death, it is day one. Day one. It's going to be a great. Read. This is pretty fast too. I think we'll be done with this maybe on Monday. This will be like a 5-day read. I think just at the pace that we're going at. The weather was clear and slightly chilly. The minarets of the town loomed above the houses in the pale rays of the sun. A jetty pier, some 2,000 yards long, extended into the roadstead. A number of fishing smacks and coasting boats, some retaining the fantastic fashion of ancient galleys, were discernible on the Red Sea. As he passed among the busy crowd, Fix, according to habit, scrutinized the passengers. As he passed among the busy crowd, Fix, according to habit, scrutinized the passers-by with a keen, rapid glance. It was now 10:30.
"The steamer doesn't come," he exclaimed as the port clock struck.
"Well, she can't be far off now," returned his companion.
"How long will she stop at Suez?"
4 hours, long enough to get in her coal. It's 1,310 miles from Suez to Aden, at the other end of the Red Sea, and she has to take in a fresh coal supply."
"And does she go from Suez directly to Bombay?"
"Without putting in anywhere."
"Good," said Fix. "If the robber is on board, he will no doubt get off at Suez, so as to reach the Dutch or French colonies in Asia by some other route. He ought to know that he would not be safe an hour in India, which is English soil."
"Unless," objected the consul, "unless he's exceptionally shrewd. An English criminal, you know, is always better concealed in London than anywhere else." This observation furnished the detective food for thought, and meanwhile the consul went away to his office. Fix, left alone, was more impatient than ever, having a presentiment that the robber was on board the Mongolia. If he had indeed left London, intending to reach the New World, he would naturally take the route via India, which was less watched and more difficult to watch than that of the Atlantic. But Fix's reflections were soon interrupted by a succession of sharp whistles which announced the arrival of the Mongolia. The porters and fellers rushed down the quay, and a dozen boats pushed off from the shore to go and meet the steamer. Soon her gigantic hull appeared, passing along between the banks, and 11 o'clock struck as she anchored in the road. She brought an unusual number of passengers, some of whom remained on deck to scan the picturesque panorama of the town, while the greater part disembarked in the boats and landed on the quay. Fix took up a position and carefully examined each face and figure which made its appearance. Presently, one of the passengers, after vigorously pushing his way through the importunate crowd of porters, came up to him and politely asked if he could point out the English consulate, at the same time showing a passport which he wished to have visaed. Fix instinctively took the passport and with a rapid glance read the description of its bearer. An involuntary motion of surprise nearly escaped him, for the description in the passport was identical with that of the bank robber which he had received from Scotland Yard.
"Is this your passport?"
asked he.
"No, it is my master's."
"And your master is?"
"He stayed on board."
"But he must go to the consuls in person so as to establish his identity."
"Oh, is that necessary?"
"Quite indispensable."
"And where is the consulate?"
"There, on the corner of the square," said Fix, pointing to a house 200 steps off.
"I'll go and fetch my master, who won't be much pleased, however, to be disturbed."
The passenger bowed to Fix and returned to the steamer. "Yeah, that's right, R.S.-ish. That's the only thing that goes through my mind every time I start up this stream in the mornings. WTF indeed. All right. Master Sphinx, what's up? How you doing? Yeah, I'm still trying to find the right voice for Mr. Fix. It's going to change a little bit, but I kind of do want him to be like a shrill imbecile kind of dude. That's what we're going for, but it's not quite getting there because I'm hitting notes that I normally wouldn't go to. Edge of my range. We're gonna see what we can do then. Very good. Okay, I was gonna take a quick little second to take a peek at some stuff here. Looking for. Let's see if this. Can I refresh here? How often does it not update enough? Man, okay, alright. And there was nothing happening there. Very nice, okay. Okay. It was 11:35. Okay, we still got a good half hour to go. There we go. Alrighty. Let's do it. Let's do it. Chapter 17. Which once more demonstrates the uselessness of passports as aids to detectives. The detective passed down the quay and rapidly made his way to the consul's office, where he was at once admitted to the presence of that official.
"Consul," said he, without preamble, "I have strong reasons for believing that my man is a passenger on the Mongolia."
And he narrated what had just passed concerning the passport.
"Well, Mr. Fix," replied the consul, "I shall not be sorry to see the rascal's face, but perhaps he won't come here. That is, if he is the person you suppose him to be. A robber doesn't quite like to leave traces of his flight behind him, and besides, he's not obliged to have his passport countersigned." "If he's as shrewd as I think he is, consul, he will come."
"To have his passport visaed?"
"Yes. Passports are only good for annoying honest folks and aiding in the flight of rogues. I assure you it will be quite the thing for him to do, but I hope you will not visa the passport."
"Why not? If the passport is genuine, I have no right to refuse."
"Still, I must keep the man here until I can get a warrant to arrest him from London." Ah, that's your lookout. But I cannot.
The consul did not finish his sentence, for as he spoke a knock was heard at the door, and two strangers entered, one of whom was the servant whom Fix had met on the quay. The other was his master, held out his passport with the request that the consul would do him the favor to visa it. The consul took the document and carefully read it, whilst Fix observed, or rather devoured, the stranger with his eyes from a corner of the room.
You are Phileas Fogg,
said the consul after reading the passport. I am.
And this man is your servant?
Oh, he is. A Frenchman named Passepartout.
You are from London?
Yes.
And you are going?
To Bombay.
Very good, sir. You know that a visa is useless and that no passport is required.
I know it, sir, replied Phileas Fogg, but I wish to prove by your visa that I came by sewers.
Very well, sir.
The consul proceeded to sign and date the passport, after which he added his official seal. Mr. Fogg paid the customary fee, coldly bowed, and went out, followed by his servant.
Well?
Queried the detective.
Well, he looks and acts like a perfectly honest man, replied the consul. Possibly, but that's not the question. Do you think, consul, that this phlegmatic gentleman resembles, feature by feature, the robber whose description I have received?
Oh, I concede that, but then all descriptions.
I'll make certain of it, interrupted Fix. The servant seems to me less mysterious than the master. Besides, he's a Frenchman and can't help talking. Excuse me for a little while, consul.
Fix started off in search of Passepartout. Meanwhile, Mr. Fogg, after leaving the consulate, repaired to the quay, gave some orders to Passepartout, went off to the Mongolia in a boat, and descended to his cabin. He took up his notebook, which contained the following memoranda. Left London Wednesday, October 2nd at 8:45 p.m. Reached Paris Thursday, October 3rd at 7:20 a.m. Left Paris Thursday at 8:40 a.m. Reached Turin by Mont-Cenis Friday, October 4th at 6:35 a.m. Left Turin Friday at 7:20 a.m. Arrived at Brindisi Saturday, October 5th at 4 p.m. Sailed on the Mongolia Saturday at 5 p.m. Reached Suez Wednesday, October 9th at 11 a.m. Total of hours spent, 158 plus, or in days, 6 days and a half. These dates were inscribed in an itinerary divided into columns, indicating the month, the day of the month, and the day for the stipulated and actual arrivals at each principal point: Paris, Brindisi, Suez, Bombay, Calcutta, Singapore, Hong Kong, Yokohama, San Francisco, New York, and London, from the 2nd of October to the 21st of December, and giving a space for setting down the gain made or the loss suffered on arrival at each locality. Thank you very much for their members there, Texas Overwatch. That's very kind. Thank you. Yeah. And Embers and a host. There we go. That's the mark of a gentleman right there. Thank you. This methodical record thus contained an account of everything needed, and Mr. Fogg always knew whether he was behindhand or in advance of his time. On this Friday, October 9th, he noted his arrival at Suez and observed that he had as yet neither gained nor lost. He sat down quietly to breakfast in his cabin, never once thinking of inspecting the town, being one of those Englishmen who are wont to see foreign countries through the eyes of their domestics. Okay. I think that's a nice little sly little dig right there. I think he was one of those Englishmen who liked to see foreign countries through the eyes of their valets. He's not interested in going out and seeing it for himself, but he's been there. He's obviously there. That's good enough. Chapter 8, in which Passepartout talks rather more, perhaps, than is prudent. Mrs. Shadowtronics, so in that version of Around the World in 80 Days which you watched, which role was Jackie Chan playing? Fix soon rejoined Passepartout. The main guy, Phileas Fogg? Okay. Fix soon rejoined Passepartout, who was lounging and looking about on the quay, as if he did not feel that he, at least, was obliged not to see anything. "Well, my friend," said the detective, coming up with him, "is your passport visaed?"
"Ah, it is you, is it, monsieur?" responded Passepartout. "Thanks, yes, the passport is all right."
"And you are looking about you?"
"Yes, but we travel so fast that I seem to be journeying in a dream. So this is Suez?"
"Yes."
"In Egypt?"
"Oh, certainly, in Egypt."
"And in Africa?"
"In Africa."
"In Africa," repeated Passepartout. "Just think, monsieur, I had no idea that we should go farther than Paris, and all that I saw of Paris was between 20 minutes past 7 and 20 minutes before 9 in the morning, between the Northern and the Lyons stations, through the windows of a car, and in a driving rain. How I regret not having seen once more Père Lachaise and the circus in the Champs-Élysées."
"You're in a great hurry, then?"
"I am not, but my master is. By the way, I must buy some shoes and shirts. We came away without trunks. Only a carpet bag."
"I'll show you an excellent shop for getting what you want."
"Really, monsieur, you are very kind."
And they walked off together, Passepartout chatting volubly as they went along.
"Above all," said he, "don't let me lose the steamer."
"You have plenty of time. It's only 12 o'clock.
Passepartout pulled out his big watch. 12, he exclaimed. "Why, it's only 8 minutes before 10.
"Your watch is slow."
"My watch? A family watch, monsieur, which has come down from my great-grandfather. It doesn't vary 5 minutes in the year. It is a perfect chronometer. Look you."
"Oh, I see how it is," said Fix. "You've kept London time, which is 2 hours behind that of Suez. You ought to regulate your watch at noon in each country."
"I regulate my watch? Never."
"Well, then, it won't always agree with the sun."
"So much the worse for the sun, monsieur. The sun will be wrong then."
And the worthy fellow returned the watch to its fob with a defiant gesture. After a few minutes' silence, Fix resumed. "You left London hastily, then?"
"I rather think so. Last Friday at 8 o'clock in the evening, Monsieur Fogg came home from his club, and 3/4 of an hour afterwards we were off."
"But where is your master going?"
"Always straight ahead. He is going round the world."
"Round the world?" cried Fix.
"Yes, and in 80 days. He says it's on a wager, but between us, I don't believe a word of it. That wouldn't be common sense. There's something else in the wind."
"Ah, Mr. Fogg is a character, is he?"
"I should say he was."
"Is he rich?"
"No doubt, for he is carrying an enormous sum in brand-new banknotes with him, and he doesn't spare the money on the way either. He has offered a large reward to the engineer of the Mongolia if he gets us to Bombay, well in advance of time."
"And you have known your master a long time?"
"Why, no. I entered his service the very day we left London."
The effect of these replies upon the already suspicious and excited detective may be imagined. The hasty departure from London soon after the robbery, the large sum carried by Mr. Fogg, his eagerness to reach distant countries, the pretext of an eccentric and foolhardy bet, all confirmed Fix in his theory.
He continued to pump poor Passepartout, and learned that he really knew little or nothing of his master, who lived a solitary existence in London, was said to be rich, though no one knew whence came his riches, and was mysterious and impenetrable in his affairs and habits. Fix felt sure that Phileas Fogg would not land at Suez, but was really going on to Bombay. "Is Bombay far from here?" asked Passepartout. "Pretty far. It's 10 days' voyage by sea." "And in what country is Bombay?" "India." "In Asia?" "Certainly." "The deuce! I was going to tell you there's one thing that worries me. My burner." "What burner?" "My gas burner, which I forgot to turn off, and which is at this moment burning at my expense. I have calculated, monsieur, that I lose 2 shillings every 24 hours, exactly 6pence more than I earn, and you will understand that the longer our journey—" Did Fix pay any attention to Passepartout's trouble about the gas? It is not probable. He was not listening, but was cogitating a project. Passepartout and he had now reached the shop where Fix left his companion to make his purchases, after recommending him not to miss the steamer, and hurried back to the consulate. Now that he was fully convinced, Fix had quite recovered his equanimity. "Consul," said he, "I have no longer any doubt. I've spotted my man. He passes himself off as an odd stick who's going round the world in 80 days. "Oh, then he's a sharp fellow," returned the consul, "and counts on returning to London after putting the police of the 2 countries off his track." "We'll see about that," replied Fix. "But are you not mistaken?" "I am not mistaken." Why was this robber so anxious to prove by the visa that he had passed through Suez? "Why? I've no idea. But listen to me." He reported in a few words the most important parts of his conversation with Passepartout. "In short," said the consul, "appearances are wholly against this man. And what are you going to do?" "Send a dispatch to London for a warrant of arrest to be dispatched instantly to Bombay, take passage on board the Mongolia, follow my rogue to India, and there, on English ground, arrest him politely, with my warrant in my hand and my hand on his shoulder." Having uttered these words with a cool, careless air, the detective took leave of the consul and repaired to the telegraph office, whence he sent the dispatch which we have seen to the London police office. A quarter of an hour later found Fix with a small bag in his hand, proceeding on board the Mongolia, and ere many moments longer the noble steamer rode out at full steam upon the waters of the Red Sea. Man, wow, we're almost 20% into this. This is crazy. It's going super fast. You're going to add this to your Kindle library? Yeah. Hey there, Terrible Cat. Yeah, Passepartout. Well, like the book says, the French like nothing more than to gossip. He just couldn't help it, apparently. It's a great book. Yeah, you should add a lot of Jules Verne stuff there. The very first, From the Earth to the Moon. Great book. And man, my boy, I choked up hard on the ending on that one. Shadow's missing this? It's okay. If he needs his sleep, he needs his sleep. All right. Lady Death is enjoying it. That's right. We've got Lady D's with us. Lady D. Very good. Okay, let me catch up on chat. Did I miss anything? Okay, yeah. So Charlie Chan, not Charlie Chan, Jackie Chan played the main guy. All right, in the thing, the one and only. Very good. All right. Let's see how we where we at. Bum bum. Okay. Chapter 9. We're getting on with it. It's a bit of a slow day today. But this guy's kind of nice too. Oh, there's Death Tom. Death Tom is here. What's up, man? What is going on, Death Tom? Good to see him.
Alrighty. Chapter 9, in which the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean prove propitious to the designs of Phileas Fogg. The distance between Suez and Aden is precisely 1,310 miles, and the regulations of the company allow the steamers 138 hours in which to traverse it. The Mongolia, thanks to the vigorous exertions of the engineer, seemed likely, so rapid was her speed, to reach her destination considerably within that time. The greater part of the passengers from Brindisi were bound for India, some for Bombay, others for Calcutta by way of Bombay, the nearest route thither, now that a railway crosses the Indian peninsula. Among the passengers was a number of officials and military officers of various grades, the latter being either attached to the regular British forces or commanding the sepoy troops, and receiving high salaries ever since the central government has assumed the powers of the East India Company. For the sub-lieutenants get £280, brigadiers £2,400, and generals of divisions £4,000. What with the military men, a number of rich young Englishmen on their travels, and the hospitable efforts of the purser, the time passed quickly on the Mongolia. The best of fare was spread upon the cabin tables at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the 8 o'clock supper, and the ladies scrupulously changed their toilets twice a day, and the hours were whirled away when the sea was tranquil with music, dancing, and games. But the Red Sea is full of caprice, and often boisterous, like most long and narrow gulfs. When the wind came from the African or Asian coast, the Mongolia, with her long hull, rolled fearfully. Then the ladies speedily disappeared below. The pianos were silent. Singing and dancing suddenly ceased. Yet the good ship ploughed straight on, unretarded by wind or wave, towards the straits of Bab el Mandeb. What was Phileas Fogg doing all this time? It might be thought that, in his anxiety, he would be constantly watching the changes of the wind, the disorderly raging of the billows. Every chance, in short, which might force the Mongolia to slacken her speed and thus interrupt his journey. But if he thought of these possibilities, he did not betray the fact by any outward sign. Good morning, Rookie Whistle. What's up? Always the same impassible member of the Reform Club, whom no incident could surprise, as unvarying as the ship's chronometers, and seldom having the curiosity even to go upon the deck, he passed through the memorable scenes of the Red Sea with cold indifference. Did not care to recognize the historic towns and villages, which, along its borders, raised their picturesque outlines against the sky, and betrayed no fear of the dangers of the Arabic Gulf, which the old historians always spoke of with horror, and upon which the ancient navigators never ventured without propitiating the gods by ample sacrifices. How did this eccentric personage pass his time on the Mongolia? He made his 4 hearty meals every day, regardless of the most persistent rolling and pitching on the part of the steamer, and he played whist indefatigably, for he had found partners as enthusiastic in the game as himself. A tax collector on the way to his post at Goa, the Reverend Decimus Smith returning to his parish at Bombay, and a brigadier general of the English army who was about to rejoin his brigade at Berenice, made up the party, and with Mr. Fogg played whist by the hour together in absorbing silence. As for Passepartout, he too had escaped seasickness, and took his meals conscientiously in the forward cabin. He rather enjoyed the voyage, for he was well fed and well lodged, took a great interest in the scenes through which they were passing, and consoled himself with the delusion that his master's whim would end at Bombay. He was pleased, on the day after leaving Suez, to find on deck the obliging person with whom he had walked and chatted on the quays. "If I am not mistaken," said he, approaching this person with his most amiable smile.
You are the gentleman who so kindly volunteered to guide me at Suez.
Ah, I quite recognize you. You are the servant of the strange Englishman.
Just so, monsieur.
Fix.
Monsieur Fix, resumed Passepartout, I'm charmed to find you on board. Where are you bound?
Like you, to Bombay.
That's capital. Have you made this trip before?
Several times. I'm one of the agents of the Peninsula Company.
Then you know India?
Why, yes, replied Fix, who spoke cautiously.
A curious place, this India.
Oh, very curious. Mosques, minarets, temples, fakirs, pagodas, tigers, snakes, elephants. I hope you'll have ample time to see the sights.
I hope so, Monsieur Fix. You'll see, a man of sound sense ought not to spend his life jumping from a steamer upon a railway train, and from a railway train upon a steamer again, pretending to make the tour of the world in 80 days. No, all these gymnastics, you may be sure, will cease at Bombay.
And Mr. Fogg is getting on well? Asked Fix in the most natural tone in the world.
Quite well, and I too. I eat like a famished ogre. It is the sea air.
But I never see your master on deck.
Never. He hasn't the least curiosity.
Do you know, Mr. Passepartout, that this pretended tour in 80 days may conceal some secret errand? Perhaps a diplomatic mission?
Faith, Monsieur Fix, I assure you I know nothing about it, nor would I give half a crown to find out.
After this meeting, Passepartout and Fix got into the habit of chatting together, the latter making it a point to gain the worthy man's confidence. He frequently offered him a glass of whisky or pale ale in the steamer bar-room, which Passepartout never failed to accept with graceful alacrity, mentally pronouncing Fix the best of good fellows. Meanwhile, the Mongolia... Exactly. Loose lips sink ships. Meanwhile, the Mongolia was pushing forward rapidly. On the 13th, Mocha, surrounded by its ruined walls whereon date trees were growing, was sighted, and on the mountains beyond were espied vast coffee fields. Passepartout was ravished to behold this celebrated place, and thought that, with its circular walls and dismantled fort, it looked like an immense coffee-cup and saucer. The following night they passed through the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, which means in Arabic the Bridge of Tears, and the next day they put in at Steamer Point, northwest of Aden Harbor, to take in coal. This matter of fueling steamers is a serious one at such distances from the coal mines. It costs the Peninsula Company some £800,000 a year. In these distant seas, coal is worth £3 or £4 sterling a ton. The Mongolia had still 1,650 miles to traverse before reaching Bombay, and was obliged to remain 4 hours at Steamer Point to coal up. But this delay, as it was foreseen, did not affect Phileas Fogg's program. Besides, the Mongolia, instead of reaching Aden on the morning of the 15th, when she was due, arrived there on the evening of the 14th, a gain of 15 hours. Mr. Fogg and his servant went ashore at Aden to have the passport again visaed. Fix, unobserved, followed them. The visa procured, Mr. Fogg returned on board to resume his former habits, while Passepartout, according to custom, sauntered about among the mixed population of Somalis, Banyans, Parsees, Jews, Arabs, and Europeans, who comprised the 25,000 inhabitants of Aden. He gazed with wonder upon the fortifications, which make this place the Gibraltar of the Indian Ocean, and the vast cisterns where the English engineers were still at work, 2,000 years after the engineers of Solomon. Very curious, said Passepartout to himself on returning to the steamer.
I see that it is by no means useless to travel if a man wants to see something anew. At 6 p.m., the Mongolia slowly moved out of the roadstead and was soon once more on the Indian Ocean. She had 168 hours in which to reach Bombay, and the sea was favorable, the wind being in the northwest and all sails aiding the engine. The steamer rolled but little. The ladies and fresh toilets reappeared on deck, and the singing and dancing were resumed. The trip was being accomplished most successfully, and Passepartout was enchanted with the congenial companion which chance had secured him, in the person of the delightful Fix. On Sunday, October 20th, towards noon, they came in sight of the Indian coast. 2 hours later, the pilot came on board. A range of hills lay against the sky and the horizon, and soon the rows of palms which adorn Bombay came distinctly into view. The steamer entered the road formed by the islands in the bay, and at 4:30 she hauled up at the quays of Bombay. Phileas Fogg was in the act of finishing the 33rd rubber of the voyage, and his partner and himself, having, by a bold stroke, captured all 13 of the tricks, concluded this fine campaign with a brilliant victory. The Mongolia was due at Bombay on the 22nd. She arrived on the 20th. This was a gain to Phileas Fogg of 2 days since his departure from London, and he calmly entered the fact in the itinerary, in the column of gains. All righty, so he's off to, well, we're exactly 20% in. Yeah, so I think at this rate, we'll be finished, we'll finish this up on Monday. Yeah. All right. So that was okay. That was pretty good. Yeah, I think it's off to a great start. I'd forgotten how funny this book was, actually. Very amusing. Let's see, where are we at? Just closing off some of my wiki pages that I'd opened up. Alrighty. But yeah, it's been a pretty decent read. Let's see. That's as far as we're going with Jules Verne today. I think we got, because it is noon. It is noon right here. They are looking for, oh yeah, they're looking for him. Well, you heard all those cops going by in the background? Yeah. All right, I'm just going to take a quick little look at our, we can finish off with a little short story, just because I kind of like short stories too. Oh, excuse me. Man, you glad you're able to get in on the day on the first one? Yeah. It was good. It was good. This poor old Bill. Okay, yeah, okay, we're just going to change, just going to do a short little story. It's by, I'm not sure I've actually read this one before. Poor old Bill. It is by Lord Dunsany, so, but I think this is one we might have skipped on over. A little short story to wind the day down with. Here we go. We're going to wind down our day with this one here. Summer vacation. What? Lady Death is. We've been missing you. I know. You got all kinds of. Oh, wrong one. All kinds of things that you're looking after. You had sandwiches. Wish I had some sandwiches. Maybe I will have some sandwiches after this. After this short story, though. Getting up earlier in the day, yeah, it's boy, yeah, I mean,
I know you're a bit of a night owl there, Lady Death, but yeah, I think by nature I am too. But it's yeah, it's one of those things you kind of like get into the routine of doing things, and when you change your routines, it can be hard, very hard to make a habit of new times. Rose needs the daytime. So here we go. We're just going to end with this one here. Poor old Bill. 1 second, just checking something real fast. This is... bloop. Poor old Bill. On an antique haunt of sailors, a tavern of the sea, the light of day was fading. For several evenings I had frequented this place, in the hope of hearing something from the sailors, as they sat over strange wines, about a rumor that had reached my ears of a certain fleet of galleons of old Spain, still said to be afloat in the South Seas, in some uncharted region. In this I was again to be disappointed. Talk was low and seldom, and I was about to leave when a sailor, wearing earrings of pure gold, lifted up his head from his wine, and looking straight before him at the wall, told his tale loudly. When later on a storm of rain arose and thundered on the tavern's leaded panes, he raised his voice without effort and spoke on still. The darker it got, the clearer his wild eyes shone. A ship with sails of the olden time was nearing fantastic isles. We had never seen such isles. We all hated the captain, and he hated us. He hated us all alike. There was no favoritism about him. And he never would talk a word with any of us, except sometimes in the evening when it was getting dark he would stop and look up and talk a bit to the men he had hanged at the yardarm. We were a mutinous crew, but Captain was the only man that had pistols. He slept with one under his pillow and kept one close behind him. There was a nasty look about the isles. They were small and flat, as though they had come up only recently from the sea, and they had no sand or rocks like honest isles, but green grass down to the water. And there were little cottages there whose looks we did not like. Their thatches came almost down to the ground and were strangely turned up at the corners, and under the low eaves were queer, dark windows, whose little leaded panes were too thick to see through. And no one, man or beast, was walking about, so that you could not know what kind of people lived there. But Captain knew. And he went ashore and into one of the cottages, and someone lit lights inside, and the little windows wore an evil look. It was quite dark when he came aboard again, and he bade a cheery good night to the men that swung from the yardarm, and he eyed us in a way that frightened poor old Bill. Next night we found that he had learned to curse, for he came on a lot of us asleep in our bunks, and among them poor old Bill, and he pointed at us with a finger and made a curse that our souls should stay all night at the top of the masts. And suddenly there was the soul of poor old Bill sitting like a monkey at the top of the mast and looking at the stars and freezing through and through. We got up a little mutiny after that. The captain comes up and points with his finger again, and this time poor old Bill and all the rest are swimming behind the ship through the cold green water, though their bodies remain on deck. It was the cabin boy found out that Captain couldn't curse when he was drunk, though he could shoot as well at one time as another. After that it was only a matter of waiting, and of losing 2 men when the time came. Some of us were murderous fellows and wanted to kill Captain, but poor old Bill was for finding a bit of an island out of the track of ships and leaving him there with his share of our year's provisions. And everybody listened to poor old Bill, and we decided to maroon Captain as soon as we caught him where he couldn't curse. It was 3 old days before Captain got drunk again, and poor old Bill and all had a dreadful time. For Captain invented new curses every day, and whenever he pointed his finger, our souls had to go. And the fishes got to know us, and so did the stars. And none of them pitied us when we froze on the masts or were hurried through forests of seaweed and lost our way. Both stars and fishes went about their businesses with cold, unastonished eyes. Once, when the sun had set and it was twilight, and the moon was showing clearer and clearer in the sky, and we stopped our work for a moment, because Captain seemed to be looking away from us at the colors in the sky, he suddenly turned and sent our souls to the moon. And it was colder there than ice at night. And there were horrible mountains making shadows, and it was all as silent as miles of tombs, and earth was shining up in the sky as big as the blade of a scythe, and we all got homesick for it. We could not speak nor cry. It was quite dark when we got back, and we were very respectful to Captain all the next day, but he cursed several of us again very soon. What we all feared most was that he would curse our souls to hell, and none of us mentioned hell above a whisper for fear that it should remind him. But on the 3rd evening, the cabin boy came and told us that Captain was drunk. And we all went to his cabin, and we found him lying there across his bunk. And he shot as he had never shot before, but he had no more than the 2 pistols, and he would only have killed 2 men if he hadn't caught Joe over the head with the end of one of the pistols. And then we tied him up. And poor old Bill put the rum between the captain's teeth and kept him drunk for 2 days, so that he could not curse, till we found a convenient rock. And before sunset of the 2nd day, we found a nice bare island for Captain, out of the track of ships, about 100 yards long and about 80 wide, and we rowed him along to it in a little boat, and gave him provisions for a year, the same as we had ourselves, because poor old Bill wanted to be fair. And we left him sitting comfortable with his back to a rock, singing a sailor's song. When we could no longer hear Captain singing, we all grew very cheerful and made a banquet out of our year's provisions, as we all hoped to be home again in under 3 weeks. We had 3 great banquets every day for a week. Every man had more than he could eat, and what was left over we threw on the floor like gentlemen. And then one day, as we saw San Juegados and wanted to sail in to spend our money, the wind changed round from behind us and beat us out to sea. There was no tacking against it and no getting into the harbor, though other ships sailed by us and anchored there. Sometimes a dead calm would fall on us, while fishing boats all around us flew before half a gale. Sometimes the wind would beat us out to sea, when nothing else was moving. All day we tried, and at night we laid to and tried again the next day, and all the sailors of the other ships were spending their money in San Juegados, and we could not come nigh it. And we spoke horrible things against the wind and against San Juegados, and sailed away. It was just the same at Norena. We kept close together now and talked in low voices. Suddenly, poor old Bill grew frightened. As we went all along the Saractic coastline, we tried again and again, and the wind was waiting for us in every harbor and sent us out to sea. Even the little islands would not have us. And then we knew that there was no landing yet for poor old Bill. And everyone upbraided his kind heart that had made them maroon Captain on a rock, so as not to have his blood upon their heads.
There was nothing to do but drift about the seas. There were no banquets now, because we feared that Captain might live his year and keep us out to sea. At first we used to hail all passing ships, and used to try to board them in the boats, but there was no towing against Captain's curse, and we had to give that up. So we played cards for a year in Captain's cabin, night and day, storm and fine, and everyone promised to pay poor old Bill when we got ashore. It was horrible to us to think what a frugal man Captain really was. He that used to get drunk every other day whenever he was at sea, and here he was still alive, and sober too, for his curse still kept us out of every port, and our provisions were gone. Well, it came to drawing lots, and Jim was the unlucky one. Jim only kept us about, oh my lord. Lord Dunsany dropping some N-bombs here. I'm going to swip, Ooh. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Well, it came to drawing lots, and Jim was the unlucky one. Jim only kept us about 3 days, and then we drew lots again. How does that make sense? I'm just going to go with African on this one. Well, it came to drawing lots, and Jim was the unlucky one. Jim only kept us about 3 days, and then we drew lots again, and this time it was the African. The African didn't keep us any longer, and we drew again, and this time it was Charlie. Still, Captain was alive. As we got fewer, one of us kept us longer. Longer and longer a mate used to last us, and we all wondered however Captain did it. It was 5 weeks over the year when we drew Mike, and he kept us for a week. And Captain was still alive. We wondered if he didn't get tired of the same old curse, but we suppose things look different when one is alone on an island. When there was only Jakes and poor old Bill and the cabin boy and Dick, we didn't draw any longer. We said that the cabin boy had had all the luck, and he mustn't expect any more. Then poor old Bill was alone with Jakes and Dick, and Captain was still alive. When there was no more boy, and the Captain still alive, Dick, who was a huge strong man like poor old Bill, said it was Jake's turn, and he was very lucky to have lived as long as he had. And poor old Bill talked it over with Jakes, and they thought it better that Dick should take his turn. Then there was Jakes. Oh, no, 1 second, switching back. Then there was Jakes and poor old Bill, and Captain would not die. And these two used to watch one another night and day, and when Dick was gone and no one else was left to them. And at last poor old Bill fell down in a faint and lay there for an hour. Then Jakes came up to him slowly with his knife and makes a stab at poor old Bill as he lies there on the deck. And poor old Bill caught hold of him by the wrist and put his knife into him twice to make quite sure, though it spoiled the best part of the meat. Then poor old Bill was all alone at sea. And the very next week, before the food gave out, Captain must have died on his bit of an island. For poor old Bill heard the captain's soul going cursing over the sea, and the day after that the ship was cast on a rocky coast. And Captain's been dead now for over 100 years. Poor old Bill is safe ashore again. But it looks as if Captain hasn't done with him yet, for poor old Bill doesn't get any older, and somehow or other he doesn't seem to die. Poor old Bill. When this was over, the man's fascination suddenly snapped, and we all jumped up and left him.
It was not only his revolting story, but it was the fearful look in the eyes of the man who told it, and the terrible ease with which his voice surpassed the roar of the rain, that decided me never again to enter that haunt of sailors, the Tavern of the Sea. Yeah, all right. Okay, all right. So, yeah, I think that's the first time that Lord Dunsany's managed to drop some N-bombs into his stuff. Man, why? Terrible. Terrible. Yeah, that's a cool little spooky story, though. That's definitely one of his darker ones. But, man, oh, man, oh, man. Yeah, I changed that for a reason, Lady Death. Yes, I did. Had to get past a couple of pages. If you know what I mean. But there we go. It's 20 past 12. I gotta go. I do. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending a little time here. Just, let me see. Where are we at? Let's take a little. Oh my lord. Why am I yawning? I should be. Do I need more? I don't know. What do we got? Let's take a look at our audiences. There we go. We got Mr. Kirby Reeves. Mr. Kirby Reeves is doing a something or other. Let's take a little look over here. Do you know Kirby Reeves? He's a cool cat. He paints miniatures and minifigures and the like. But yeah, I'm afraid I need to go. I do. I got some things to do, some stuff to work on. Yeah. Thank you for the re-up on the channel subscription there. Thank you. That was Rose Morales. Thank you. Very good. Thank you for the embers. We had some sweet embers come rolling on through. Oh yeah, we did. From we had that was Rose, I think, Tillable Cat, Mrs. Shadowtronics, and Mythweaver. Thank you for those. Yeah, I like you them. Indeed, I do. Thank you, and it's great seeing Lady Death here again. Yeah, we miss you. We miss you. We still do gaming in the evening, but I know you particularly like the book club stuff there. So that is where that's at. Don't forget, for those who might be new to the channel, Monday through Thursday is 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. That's our normal book club time. We're reading Around the World in 80 Days. Off to a great start. We're 20% into it. You can pick up a copy for free up on from the Amazon Kindle store or from Gutenberg.org or pretty much any online archive. It is free. Don't pay for it. I mean, if you're buying the hardcover or paperback, I mean, that's different. But yeah, a digital download, yeah, and that should not cost you anything. But anyway, we'll see you all tomorrow. Well, actually, you're going to see us later today for some gaming. Tonight's going to be a great Halo night. Might start off with a bit of Fortnite, just to rustle some jimmies, and then we'll get some Halo in. Yeah, but there we go. Have a great night. I'm going to stop the stream here, throw it over to Mr. Kirby Reeves. He's just chill figurine painting. I'm going to try that out.